Hello, friends and neighbors. Let's talk today about the impact of a personal experience.
Welcome to A Word for Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us. Each Wednesday, you will find Boggs Family Ministries is here with our host, Davy Boggs. Having you along with us is a wonderful addition. Now, let's enjoy together A Word for Wednesday.
Thank you, Brother Devin, and thank you for joining us on A Word for Wednesday. I cannot express how much I appreciate you joining us and offering a comment, either publicly or personal encouragement. I really appreciate it. The last couple of weeks I've been talking about the value of personal revival, a personal experience with God, something that goes deeper than just skin deep or eye level, an experience that goes to the heart. The first week I talked about the importance of a personal experience. The Ethiopian eunuch, he was important enough to stop a revival, or for that preacher to leave that revival and go find him. Last week I talked about the intensity of a personal experience and how intense Apostle Paul's experience was and how it burned in him all of his life. And really, I could talk about both of those, and maybe will today, to talk about the impact of a personal experience. You see, my brother and sister, we do not live in a vacuum. We do not only affect ourselves, we affect people around us. Our experience with God, or our lack of experience with God, will affect our children, will affect our siblings, will affect our parents, will affect our co-workers, will affect our neighbors. Everyone we have contact with very much will sooner or later be impacted by whether we have a great experience with God or whether we have a shallow experience with God. Look at that Ethiopian eunuch. Now, I was reading the other day a man who said that modern Ethiopia is not exactly the same as the Ethiopia of that day. It overlaps some, but not exactly. The borders have changed. I really don't know the facts of that, but I know this. Even in the early centuries, the main two religions in Ethiopia were they worshipped a snake god, and the second was a form of Judaism. They had been impacted by the Jewish religion, maybe going back centuries before that. That's where this Ethiopian was. He was a Jewish proselyte. He had been up to Jerusalem and was going back home. This man had a personal experience that was so intense that it seems he affected his whole nation. You see, that's why one man is important. Philip's in a great revival. He goes to the desert for one man. But the nation of Ethiopia was the first African nation to be predominantly Christian. In fact, many African nations are still not predominantly Christian, and most that are predominantly Christian did not really come to the knowledge of Christ with churches there until the last few hundred years. But Ethiopia was predominantly Christian in the 2nd century. And in the 3rd century, they were the first area in the world to make Christianity the religion. That was done in the Roman Empire in the 300s. It was also done in Ethiopia in the early 300s, is what I have read. I say to you, that one man's experience seems to have affected millions of people since then. Early on, his nation became predominantly Christian. Oh, hallelujah. Today, they are 63% Christian all these years later. Your personal experience can have a great impact. In 1851, I think it was, let me look here to make sure, 1850, January 6th, a 15-year-old boy was on his way to church walking up a hill in a blizzard. It finally got so bad that he turned down a narrow street where he knew there was a primitive Methodist church nearby. He realized he was not going to make it to the church that he was going to. He ducked in and sat in the back. In that church, because of the storm, there were only 12 to 15 people there. The preacher hadn't even made it to church because of the storm. One of the men, not a preacher, realizing they had a visitor, he decided they needed some preaching. His preaching was not skilled. He didn't say much more than his verse, this man recalled later, but his verse was powerful. Look unto me and be ye saved, all the ends of the earth. This man said later he did not even pronounce the words rightly. But it did not matter. He said, I caught a glimpse of hope for me in that text. Look to me. Look to Jesus, this man took from that message. Look unto me and you will be saved. Look unto me, he said. I'm sweating great drops of blood. Look unto me. I'm hanging on a cross. Look unto me. I'm dead and buried. Look unto me. I rise again. Look unto me. I ascend. I am sitting at the Father's right hand. Oh, look unto me. This young man was a soul that was searching unsuccessfully, it seemed, for the peace of God. He could not grasp salvation until this tradesman, who was not a preacher, who was not studied, in the middle of a blizzard said, look unto me, look unto Christ and be saved. That 15-year-old boy was saved that very snowy morning. It was only a very few years until all of London was flocking to hear that young man preach the gospel. He preached to thousands and thousands every Sunday. He was a prolific writer and left hundreds and hundreds of books behind. That young man who had that personal experience of salvation in a snowstorm was Charles Spurgeon. That young man's experience was important. You're mighty right, man down in the front that thinks that boy needs some preaching. He's worth it. Don't go home without giving that boy the word, because what you give him will be life to thousands of people. D.L. Moody was saved in obscure circumstances, much the same. He became part of a Sunday school class in Chicago. That Sunday school teacher went to his work to visit him in a shoe store. He was in the back stocking the shelves. D.L. Moody was just a very young man. He went back to him and talked to him about his personal soul, about his personal condition. Not long later, D.L. Moody was saved. In just a little while, he desired to teach a Sunday school class. They said, go get the people and you can teach a Sunday school class. In just a little while, There were more people than they could hold in the buildings. He shook 2 continents with his preaching because shoe sales had a personal experience. One of my favorite true stories. Many of you heard me tell it over and over. I've been telling this 16 years, and if I live 60 years or if I live 6 months, I'll still be telling this story. David and Svi Flood left their native land to go to the Belgian Congo in 1921 to be missionaries. After much hardship and sickness, Svi Flood died 17 days after giving birth 100 miles in the jungle from the mission station. David Flood just was embittered and misunderstanding what God was doing, had no clue. He left. He turned his back on God, stayed away from God for many, many years, was angry and bitter at God. Svi Flood had died, a young lady, I think 26 years old, so much talent, so much amazing ability, but died, and only one soul. In fact, their whole mission effort involved winning one 8-year-old boy. That's it. They didn't win anybody else to Jesus, but they found, her daughter found years later, that 8-year-old boy grew up in that village that rejected Christianity, the village of Nadalara, and he started a school. He had permission from the chief, and he taught the kids of Christ, and he won them to Christ. He taught their parents of Christ and won them to Christ. And 25, 30, 40 years later, there were 600 believers in that village. But that's not all. That 8-year-old boy eventually became the superintendent over an organization of Christians in that country of 110,000 strong. What an impact an 8-year-old boy had, who had a personal experience with God. What could God do with a surrendered you? What could God accomplish if we had such an experience that we were changed forever? How many people could you affect? You say, Brother Davey, I can't preach. I can't hurt. You can tell them what God's done for you. You don't have to know chapter and verse. It's good to learn the Bible, but you don't have to know where everything is. Just tell them, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Do like the blind young man in the Bible when they ask him, tell us what happened to you. He said, I was blind and he healed me. And they said, he's a sinner. He said, whether he's a sinner or not, I'm going to leave it up to you. I've never heard of a sinner doing this. All I know is I was blind and now I see. You cannot argue with a personal experience. Now, you're going to be persuaded possibly to go some other direction. You will give up your convictions, turn your back on your proclamations, because they were all done with the tongue and the brain. But when you have an experience, you will never be the same. Oh, hallelujah. God, give us a personal experience that makes an impact on the lives around us. That's my prayer, and that is my word for Wednesday. Man, I'm stirred by that. Oh, yes, I am. I can't wait to preach that. I can't wait to live that. Thank you so much for joining us. God bless you, dear friends. I'm going to do my best to see you back here next Wednesday. Thank you.
That is our word for Wednesday. We are so glad that you've spent a few minutes with us today. If you've been touched by today's episode, please share it with your friends and family. We welcome your questions or comments below or by email. You can find the email address in the description, along with a link to Mile Markers, the website for Boggs Family Ministries. Also, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thank you again, and we hope to see you next Wednesday.
Ciao for now.